Welcome to episode 18 of Dr. G at the Heart of Healthcare. Today we are talking to Miss Aisha Adkins. The title today is Millennial Caregiver, a daughter navigating the caregiver lifestyle. We've been curating some resources for caregivers, and this is a woman that I've seen do a lot of work on Twitter. So I wanted to have her stop by, and coincidentally, or serendipitously, or just fate, her mom recently passed away. So I want to make sure that I express condolences. You know, the whole community has been surrounding you. Thank you for being here and welcome. Hello.
Yes, thank you so much. I certainly appreciate the condolences and the support. It's certainly been an interesting last almost 3 weeks um, as of tomorrow from the date of this recording.
Wow. So, well, let's just start by honoring your mom. I usually start with other things, and I'm sitting here in my window looking at the clouds. And what do you want us to know about her?
Oh, wow. You know, my mother was amazing. She was an entrepreneur. She was creative. She had a beautiful voice, but I think what she'll be remembered for most of all is her kind spirit. She never met a stranger and was always really until, the day of her passing, looking for ways, trying to find opportunities to help and uplift other people. And that is just something that's a legacy that she will leave with everyone who knew her. And it makes me so proud to be her daughter.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So let me just introduce you. Like I said, Aisha Adkins. I don't know what all these credentials mean, so you can educate me. I see you have MPA, CNP. What are those? If you tell me
Sure.
briefly.
Certainly. So MPA is a Master of Public Administrations. I have my concentration in nonprofit management with a focus in public health and sociology. CNP is just a certified, I shouldn't say just, I earned it, but it was a certified nonprofit professional.
Amen. That's right, not just. So I see you have your website, Storyteller, Care Partner, Thought Leader, based in the ATL. Your mother's name was Linda. She passed away. You mentioned in one of your videos that, your father, Ron, is there. How's he doing?
Yeah, so my mom's name is actually Rosetta. Her middle name is
Oh,
Linda,
sorry.
though.
Sorry,
Yeah, no,
Rosetta
no
Linda.
worries. Yep,
Rosetta
yep,
Linda.
yep.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, my dad, Ron, he is, he's doing well. Both of my parents, are people of faith. And, my dad's definitely been relying on his faith and relying on the support of family and friends who continue to reach out, continue to laugh with him, to reminisce with him. So he has been, as he always has been throughout my life, a pillar of strength. And that's not to say that he is someone who is, macho and, too afraid to express emotion or, those sorts of things. He is certainly a gentle man, but he has really had this quiet calm and strength about him that has certainly been helpful for me in this journey.
Yeah. And you mentioned the journey. I saw that you have been taking care of your mom for 10 years. Could you share with us, again, I know, everything is kind of developed now, and like, tell us about that journey. And I know we can't grasp it all in this little episode, but what stands out to you about everything you've encountered? Just whatever comes to mind.
Yeah. So I started my journey about a decade ago, back in 2013, when my mother was first diagnosed with frontotemporal degeneration or frontotemporal dementia, FTD for short. And it is the leading form of dementia for people under the age of 60, you know, as is the case with so many neurodegenerative diseases and other ailments that exist in the world. Black folks are more likely to develop the disease. It's more prevalent in women. A study was recently released that it's also more prevalent in people who live in the eastern and southeastern parts of the U.S. So unfortunately, my mother was kind of a poster person for the disease in a lot of ways. And initially when she was diagnosed, I knew very little about dementia or Alzheimer's or any of these diseases, but I did know that things like wandering could take place and other potential ways that she could end up in harm's way. So without too much deliberation, we as a family determined that I would leave my first big girl job and go ahead and stay home with her. What became very clear to me early on was just the lack of access to resources, the lack of access to comprehensive care, particularly for people under the age of 65. And my mother was not eligible for Medicaid at the time. So that's the program through which long-term care services is funded in the US. So I really just got to witness firsthand some of those structural challenges that we have with long-term care in the US. But I also really, for the first time, saw the interpersonal challenges that come with caring for someone with dementia and how that plays into role changes and how you maintain a household. And as a millennial, really, I think it fast forwarded my development and furthered my trajectory into adulthood in ways that I wasn't quite ready for, to navigating all of these systems, understanding language, dealing with some really big life questions that I really did not anticipate having to encounter for a few more decades. And I learned a lot of really powerful lessons as well about the impermanence of life, the fragility of life, and the importance of valuing those who are in your life while they're here, understanding that I get one set of parents. For a long time, I really felt as though I was missing out on the aspects of life that millennials kind of, and any really young person is raised to believe are the milestones in life. So, getting that big job offer, getting the house and the, starting the family, getting married and all of those things. And those were not things that were happening in my life because I was dedicated to caring for my mother. But once I really came to terms with my role and reprioritized my life, I really started to appreciate the time that I was spending with my family.
Wow. Those are some great insights. I have a really robust website, which is our resource for the day. I mean, you're involved in so many things. Tell us more about that. I mean, because I don't even know where to start. You have a lot going on your website, a lot of resources that you've curated and in your own career. I mean, this is a career. We take for granted the unpaid caregiving hours that family members have to provide or get to provide, I should say, for their family members, and sacrifice your own career outside of the home for it. But it's important work. So tell us about that.
There's so many resources that are really helpful in guiding caregivers around getting access to the supports that they need. Some of the supports that I've found tremendously helpful are making sure that I have access to things like therapy. That's been a very integral part in my caregiving journey. All right, I believe I have some links. If I don't, I'll make sure that they're present. But
Mhm.
to resources like their therapy for Black girls and inclusive therapists, where you can have access to, sliding scale fee therapy sessions and making sure that I'm tapping into support groups. I know Hilarity for Charity is another organization that runs support groups for caregivers, and specifically for African American caregivers as well. So there are so many resources that are available, but I think the number one challenge that people have, or the thing that I find that comes up in conversation with other folks who are caring for loved ones and for other people in their life, is not identifying as a caregiver, right? And so until you can make that connection, you don't know what is available to you. So I definitely would say check out websites like carryingacross.org, the National Alliance for Caregiving, caregiving.com, just to educate yourself about what it means to be a caregiver and to connect with other people who might be going through similar experiences.
Mhm. Thank you for mentioning, I first identifying with the care as a caregiver so that they can access the resources that are available and not always apparent to, someone who finds himself in this situation. I was wondering, about how your identity may have shifted over time. Um, First being a millennial and then finding yourself as a caregiver and all those, life milestones that we think we're supposed to have. And now your mom is gone. Like, that's just something that my heart was wondering about. Like, how did you process anticipatory grief, knowing that there is, a trajectory for the frontotemporal dementia, and now we're here. So are you still in shock? Like, where are you?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think anticipatory grief is something that a lot of caregivers for people with chronic illnesses, with folks who are dealing with degenerative diseases experience, because as much as I'm grieving, the physical loss of my mother, now I've been grieving the essence of who she was for, over 10 years. And so, as pieces of her personality and her mobility and her cognition began to slip away as the disease ate away at her brain, right? And so, um, what you find is that it didn't matter how long she lived with the disease; it never got easier. There was never a day where I was comfortable with the disease. Um, it really ravishes so many families, and it can take a tremendous toll. Um, what I've noticed in since her passing, what I've noticed is that the grief simply just shifts shape. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't go away. Um, you end up grieving kind of everything that you didn't have an opportunity to grieve during that caregiving journey. And that's compounded with now the physical loss of the person that you were caring for. And so you end up with a very complex kind of what I describe as a puzzle of grief, and different pieces represent different types of grief and different circumstances, different people, and they're different sizes, and those sizes can change over time. But that's really what I'm feeling in this moment, is just really sitting with everything that's happened over the last 10 years, even the loss of other family and friends, where maybe I was unable to attend services and didn't experience that closure, and things like that, or opportunities that maybe I felt were quote unquote missed at the time. So really kind of processing all of that and making sense of it, and also looking forward and thinking, well, what does the future look like without my mom in it? What does it look like that now my caregiving role again has shifted? Because even though I talk predominantly about my mother, I also am a caregiver for my father as well. So things just look different now. But they're changing every day. Yeah.
Wow, since we haven't seen each other in a, casual environment and personally, I'm wondering if this is just your personality where you're calm and steady, or is this a part of just you kind of sitting still in the grief and maybe fatigue of everything you've done?
I think it's a coping mechanism that I developed throughout my caregiving journey, because what I realized probably about year 5 is that there's this hypervigilance that a lot of caregivers describe, where you're always just waiting for something to go wrong or waiting to get that call about over an emergency. And not only is that not good for your physical and mental health, it's not practical to live that way. And so as a coping mechanism, I really borrowed a page from my father's book, and I really have tried my best to adopt a calmer demeanor. But it certainly was not always this way. And I have my moments. I have my moments where I melt down, I break down, I cry, I scream, I throw things. But for the sake of my health and looking forward at my own future, I've really had to adopt this more kind of steady, almost stoic sort of demeanor about myself, which is interesting. It'll be interesting to see if other parts of my personality will begin to kind of spring forth, and what that will look like, or if this will be the predominant way that I show up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's calming to me. I've learned so much, curating these resources about the statistics, the bleak statistics. This weekend, we're actually going to release a podcast about a foundation for caregivers, and the foundation was birthed because of the crisis that caregivers are in, and they shared some things about how some caregivers will pass away before the person they're taking care of, the overwhelming stress, um, just some really bleak things. And I didn't know, but I want to know so that I can help. It's one thing for me to, in the work I do, take care of the patient and say, oh, okay, caregiver, it's going to be okay. But I've seen some things recently that just brought it in my face. And so, in my work, I just wanted to just get this information, get involved. I mean, you've been in the work, I know we have Miss Guthrie. There's a lot of people in the work in the community. So maybe I'm late, but I want to just kind of, amplify the message that you guys are already doing.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think it's never too late, right? Because the experience is always brand new to someone. And I think so many people kind of assume, speaking of not identifying as caregivers, I think so many people don't think that it's going to happen to them. But we know that people will be touched by care because they'll either be a care recipient, a caregiver, or both at some point in their life. So it's always important to elevate these conversations. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. So I like to on the podcast, give people things so they can navigate the healthcare system. So your story is the story, and the story, of honoring your mom and her life and her legacy. And I want to touch on a little bit, just for the teaching point about frontotemporal dementia. The listeners may have heard about it for the first time because of Bruce Willis. The celebrities kind of bring that to our attention. Would you share briefly, some symptoms or some things that may have manifested, and then a little bit of the trajectory of things?
Sure. So
Mhm.
the first thing I always like to let folks know is that, when you've met one person with a form of dementia, you've met that one person, right? So everyone experiences the disease and may present with different symptoms. But that being said, some things to look for are, apathy, kind of maybe not caring as much about things that they once did care about, marked differences and changes in personality. So someone may become very easily irritated, very easily agitated, may overreact very dramatically to what may seem like a very simple or harmless irritant. Um, they may cry more frequently, may become may experience delusions, hallucinations, seeing and hearing things that aren't actually there, or believing a reality that's very different from the one that exists for the rest of us. So for my mother, in addition to many of those symptoms, she also experienced short-term memory loss and continued to experience that. And that memory loss progressed throughout her disease. That's not the case for everyone with FTD, but that's something that she did experience as well. And so, these are all things that if you notice them, you want to reach out to, if you have a primary care physician who can refer you to preferably a psychoneurologist, a neuropsychiatrist rather. That would be your first go-to. They're very rare in many places. And so if you're not able to connect with a neuropsychiatrist, then a neurologist would be your second best bet.
Hmm. So, thank you for that. So, as the disease progressed over 10
Mhm.
years and your mom began to, um, you know, decline in function and nutrition, cognition, things of that nature, um, did you find any healthcare, in-home healthcare, like
Mhm.
palliative care or hospice care for her?
Yes. So initially, we started with in home care where they assisted with her activities of daily living. So things like bathing, dressing, feeding, light housekeeping, and those sorts of things. And that was, really to help me as I, am working full time, in addition to helping her and providing also that companionship. As the disease progressed, we eventually did call on hospice. And that's something that I want to emphasize is particularly in Black communities, there can be a stigma around hospice. There can be a fear of it. There's this kind of misconception that by placing someone in hospice care, which can be done at home, by the way, but by placing someone on hospice care, there's this idea that you're kind of hurrying death or hurrying sundown, as my family says. But that's just not the case at all. Hospice care, palliative care are designed to make sure that the end of life is as comfortable as possible. And so that might look like pain management. It certainly did for my mother in her last days. It can look like various forms of therapy to make sure that there's mobility that's optimized there for folks who maybe are having difficulties with that. And so it's really about the quality of life, and making sure that that they can maintain as good a quality of life as they can, right through until their last days. And it
Mhm.
really helps you to be able to focus more on just being present with them. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome for me to hear. Um, and the way it's just so well put, so you can be present with them. Um, Healthcare brought into your home. That's how I define hospice care. You mentioned, I want to touch on those misconceptions because that's why I have this podcast. Um, my first episode was the H word. Hospice is not a bad H word because I want to make our culture more hospice friendly. So you mentioned that your family, I'm guessing your extended family, referred to it as, you said sundown, or what did you say? I didn't quite catch
Oh,
that.
sure. Yes. So what I've heard in some instances, not necessarily from my own family, but in
Okay.
talking with other families, is there's this idea of hurrying sundown, right? That you are
Mm,
just welcoming death with open arms if you place your loved one on hospice, rather than prolonging their life. One of the things that this entire experience has really underscored for me is the need for a high quality of life over the longest possible quality of life. And I
mhm.
think people get attached to the idea of saying, "Oh, well, grandmama lived to be 100." That's great, but what was grandmama's quality of life? If she suffered and was in pain and fearful and confused, well, could she have maybe done without 5 of those painful years? And I know that that's a kind of a blunt way to put it, but I think in our in the selfish part of love, sometimes that's the way that we view wanting to spend time with the people that we care about is forever. And sometimes, I know for me personally, I would rather um, have a good quality of life where I feel good and I feel well taken care of for, than a long life of suffering.
Mm. So well put. Thought leader indeed.
Mm.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. As I mentioned, my intention was, to honor your mom's memory and let you voice some of the challenges you faced while, navigating the healthcare system. I'm wondering if I mean, you've already dropped gem after gem after gem in the middle of your grief. And yeah, we're going to have to really break this down because you've dropped a ton. But I'm wondering if you had any last gems you wanted to leave with our listeners, who'll be they're probably wanting to hear from you or just making sure you're okay. And we're going to put this out soon, within the week. So anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I just, for those who may be listening who've already reached out, I appreciate you so very much. It can be a very lonely existence being particularly a millennial caregiver, but I have felt so loved and so just appreciated and seen. And so but if folks are interested in reaching out and folks want to learn more, please feel free to visit aishaadkins.com. And there are links to all of my social media. I'd love to hear from you. And I would say, you know, you have to take care of yourself. If it's something as simple as making sure that you stay hydrated, that may be the most difficult thing to do, but it can also be the simplest thing for you to do um, along this journey. Because it can be very easy to neglect yourself unintentionally, right? But we focus all of our attention on the person we're caring for. And for years I didn't go to the doctor and I didn't, exercise. I didn't do the things that I needed to do in order to have, my best quality of life because I was so focused on making sure my mother and father saw the best quality of life for them. And then playing catch up now. And it's been challenging, but um, so I would say like whatever you can do, whatever simple things you can do, making, the occasional better health choice in terms of food, or as I said, stay hydrated. And I'm a big proponent of that. Um, taking a nap when you can, those sorts of things make all the difference.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for being here. I look forward to connecting with you again at some point, but we appreciate all you've done to enrich the caregiver community, to create community for them, because I have learned that it's very lonely and it's beautiful what you've done. So thank you for being here, especially during this sacred time. And I wish you the best, and we're here for you.
Thank you so much, Dr. G. I appreciate you.
All right. Peace, everyone.